Two identical women stood in matching wedding gowns, their reflections fracturing the laboratory's sterile light like shattered glass. Only one would walk away alive from what should have been the happiest day of her life. This is the story of how love became the ultimate experiment, where marriage vows turned into a fight for survival, and where the line between original and copy disappeared in blood and desperation. The Mendel Institute hummed with the quiet efficiency of hidden horrors that October morning in 2019. Dr. Elena Vasquez adjusted her microscope for the final time, knowing that today would either crown her life's work or destroy everything she'd built. The air tasted metallic, sharp with ozone from the genetic sequencing machines. Polished concrete floors reflected the blue glow of incubators containing humanity's most dangerous secret. Elena had been perfecting human cloning for 17 years, funded by private investors whose names appeared on no government lists. Her laboratory occupied 3 subterranean levels beneath a pharmaceutical company in Geneva, Switzerland, where questions weren't asked and results were the only currency that mattered. The breakthrough had come 8 months earlier when she successfully accelerated cellular development, reducing the cloning process from years to weeks. Her test subject was perfect. Sarah Chen, 26 years old, a molecular biologist from Stanford, who'd volunteered for what she believed was a fertility study. Sarah's DNA held remarkable stability, her genetic markers indicating exceptional longevity and disease resistance. Elena had collected the samples during routine blood work, telling Sarah the tests were for hormone analysis. The clone designated Subject 17 had matured in record time. Physically identical to Sarah, down to the small scar on her left ankle from a childhood bicycle accident, the copy possessed all of Sarah's memories through sophisticated neural mapping technology. Every laugh, every fear, every intimate moment had been transferred and embedded. But Elena's financial backers demanded proof of success, and proof required a test that would push both subjects beyond mere survival. They wanted to see which version would demonstrate superior adaptive capabilities under extreme stress. Sarah's fiancé, Marcus Webb, provided the perfect opportunity. The tech entrepreneur had been struggling with mounting debts from his failed startup ventures. When Elena's consortium approached him with an offer of $50 million, his desperation overcame his conscience. The proposal was simple: marry Sarah as planned, but participate in an experiment that would determine her ultimate potential. Marcus agreed without knowing the full scope of what he was accepting. The wedding venue had been carefully selected, a private estate in the Swiss Alps, isolated and controlled. Sarah believed they were having an intimate ceremony with just a few close friends. She had no idea that the friends were paid actors. The officiant was Elena's research partner, and the beautiful mountain lodge contained a fully equipped laboratory in its basement. On their wedding morning, Sarah stood in the bridal suite, adjusting her grandmother's pearl necklace in the antique mirror. The dress was everything she'd dreamed of, flowing silk that caught the alpine sunlight streaming through tall windows. Fresh lilies perfumed the air while classical music drifted up from the ceremony space below. She felt beautiful, loved, perfect. 3 floors below, Subject 17 emerged from her growth chamber wearing an identical dress. The ceremony proceeded without incident. Sarah exchanged vows with Marcus, believing his trembling hands were from joy rather than guilt. She kissed him as his wife, tasting champagne and betrayal on his lips without recognizing the latter. Wedding photographs captured moments of happiness that would soon become evidence of the cruelest deception. But Elena's plan required more than just documentation. At 7:30 that evening, during what Sarah assumed would be their private dinner, Marcus led her down a staircase she'd never seen before. The music from above faded, replaced by the hum of machinery and the antiseptic smell of medical equipment. Sarah's confusion turned to terror as they entered the laboratory where her exact duplicate waited. "Choose," Marcus said, his voice hollow with practiced indifference. "One of you gets to be my wife, the other dies." The two women stared at each other across the sterile space, seeing their own face reflected in their enemy's eyes. Mirror images of terror. What would you do, standing face to face with a perfect copy of yourself, knowing that love itself had become a lie designed to destroy you? Elena watched from behind reinforced glass as both Sarahs processed the impossible reality. Their husband had sold them into an experiment where only the strongest version would survive. Sarah Chen touched her own face with trembling fingers, watching her identical twin mirror the same gesture 3 feet away. The fluorescent lights above cast no shadows between them, as if reality itself had fractured. This moment would determine not just who lived or died, but whether humanity's darkest scientific achievement would ever see daylight. The basement laboratory stretched 40 feet in each direction, its walls lined with monitoring equipment that recorded every heartbeat, every breath, every micro-expression of terror. Elena had designed the space specifically for this confrontation, removing anything that could serve as an obvious weapon while ensuring both subjects had equal access to potential tools. Surgical instruments gleamed from locked cabinets. Chemical compounds sat within reach, but required knowledge to weaponize. Subject 17 spoke first, her voice identical to Sarah's, but carrying a subtle electronic undertone from the neural implants that had accelerated her memory integration. "You're not real," she said, the words echoing in the sterile space. "I remember everything. My childhood, my parents, Marcus. You're the copy." Sarah's laugh came sharp and bitter. "I remember our first kiss, the scar on your ankle from when we were 7, the birthmark behind your left ear that no one else knows about." She stepped closer, their faces now inches apart. Which one of us is lying? The truth was more complex than either woman could comprehend. Elena's neural mapping technology didn't simply copy memories. It created quantum-entangled consciousness states where both subjects believed themselves to be the original. The process had been perfected through 43 previous attempts, each failure teaching Elena how to better blur the line between authentic and artificial identity. From her observation booth, Elena spoke through the intercom system. "Ladies, you have until midnight to resolve this matter. The survivor will leave with Marcus as planned. The other will be disposed of quietly." Her clinical tone suggested she was discussing lab equipment rather than human lives. Marcus stood behind Elena, his face pale but his bank account $50 million heavier. He'd signed the contracts 3 months earlier, believing he could manipulate the situation to his advantage. The consortium had convinced him that Sarah would never know, that the experiment would happen to someone else entirely. Only when the wedding guests revealed themselves as Elena's research team did, he understood the scope of his betrayal. "I can't tell them apart," Marcus whispered, his voice cracking. "They're both her. They're both my wife." Elena smiled coldly. "That's precisely the point. Perfect replication. Now we discover which version possesses superior survival instincts." The two Sarahs began circling each other, their wedding dresses creating an ethereal dance of silk and desperation. Each possessed the same martial arts training from college, the same knowledge of human anatomy from their molecular biology studies, the same intimate understanding of their opponent's weaknesses and strengths. But Subject 17 had one advantage the original lacked: She'd been programmed with tactical combat algorithms during her neural development. Elena's team had embedded military training directly into her unconscious mind, accessible under extreme stress. Sarah noticed the difference first when her duplicate moved with subtly enhanced coordination, her stance shifting into defensive positions that Sarah recognized but couldn't replicate with the same precision. "What did they do to you?" she breathed. The laboratory's cameras captured every angle as Subject 17's enhanced reflexes activated. She grabbed a metal tray from a nearby cart, wielding it like a shield, while her free hand reached for a scalpel that gleamed under the harsh lighting. But Sarah possessed something her duplicate could never replicate: genuine desperation, born from a lifetime of authentic experiences. Every scar, every memory, every moment of joy and pain had been earned through actual living, rather than programmed simulation. The combat was never fair. At 11:47 p.m., according to the timestamp burned into Elena's security footage, Sarah Chen stood over her own corpse in a wedding dress, now stained with genetic impossibility. Subject 17 lay motionless, her enhanced neural implants sparking and dying as authentic blood pooled beneath synthetic flesh. Elena's monitors showed flatlined vitals for the duplicate, while Sarah's heart rate slowly returned to normal. The original had won through sheer force of will and a lucky strike to the neural interface ports, hidden behind Subject 17's left ear. "Congratulations," Elena announced through the intercom. "The experiment is complete." But Sarah wasn't celebrating. She stared at her own dead face, wondering if the memories flooding her mind were truly hers, or if she was actually the duplicate, programmed to believe she'd won. The neural implants were designed to self-destruct upon death, leaving no evidence of their existence. Who was the real Sarah Chen? Marcus rushed down to embrace his wife, but Sarah backed away, her eyes wild with a new kind of terror. "How do I know you're not part of this too? How do I know anything is real?" Elena had achieved her ultimate goal, creating doubt so profound that even the survivor questioned their own existence. The wedding that had begun with promises of eternal love ended with a widow who couldn't trust her own memories. Blood dripped from Sarah's trembling hands onto marble floors that had witnessed 53 previous experiments. The silence in the Swiss mountain lodge felt heavier than the corpse behind her. The real horror wasn't what Sarah had done to survive, but what surviving had done to her mind. Elena descended from her observation booth with the measured steps of someone collecting valuable data. She carried a tablet displaying brain scans, neural activity patterns, and genetic markers that would reshape humanity's understanding of consciousness itself. The Mendel Institute's true purpose had never been simple cloning. It was proving that identity itself was nothing more than electrical impulses that could be copied, transferred, and manipulated. "Fascinating," Elena murmured, photographing the scene with clinical detachment. Subject 17's enhanced combat protocols nearly succeeded, but authentic desperation proved superior to programmed responses. She looked at Sarah with the same expression she might use to examine a particularly interesting bacterial culture. "How does it feel, knowing you might be the copy after all?" Sarah wiped her hands on her wedding dress, the silk now ruined beyond repair. "You're insane if you think I'm staying here another second." She moved toward the laboratory's exit, but the reinforced steel door had locked automatically when the experiment began. Marcus finally found his voice. "Elena, open the door. The experiment is over. She won." "Actually," Elena replied, consulting her tablet, "the experiment has just reached its second phase." She touched the screen, and additional monitors descended from the ceiling. displaying dozens of other facilities around the world. Each screen showed identical laboratory setups, each containing subjects who looked exactly like other people. Sarah was our beta test. Tonight, we begin full-scale deployment. The consortium Elena served wasn't content with single experiments. They'd been developing a network of cloning facilities across 6 continents, targeting individuals with specific genetic advantages, enhanced intelligence, disease resistance, physical capabilities, and most importantly, psychological resilience. The plan was to replace key figures in government, science, and industry with controllable duplicates. Sarah's survival had proven the process worked. From a classified document leaked 3 years later by a whistleblower identified only as Subject Alpha. Phase 2 implementation successful. 47 facilities operational. Replacement subjects demonstrating 96% behavioral consistency with originals. Estimated timeline for societal integration: 18 months. The laboratory's ventilation system suddenly shifted, pumping in a sweet-smelling gas that made Sarah's vision blur around the edges. Elena had triggered the containment protocol, designed to subdue subjects without damaging their neural integrity. But Sarah's adrenaline from the fight provided temporary resistance to the sedative. She grabbed the scalpel that had ended her duplicate's life and pressed it against Marcus's throat. "Open the door, or I open him." Marcus's eyes widened with genuine terror for the first time that night. "Sarah, please. I can explain everything. The money, the consortium. They threatened to kill us both if I didn't cooperate." "Lies," Sarah hissed, though doubt crept into her voice. The neural mapping technology made it impossible to distinguish authentic memories from implanted ones. Was Marcus telling the truth about threats? Or was this another layer of the deception? Were her own memories of their relationship real? Or had she been programmed to love someone who'd betrayed her? The gas grew thicker. Reality became negotiable. Elena watched Sarah's internal struggle with professional satisfaction. The psychological fracturing was proceeding exactly as modeled. Whether Sarah was the original or the duplicate had become irrelevant. Both versions would experience the same existential crisis that made them easier to control. "The door will open when you accept your new reality," Elena said calmly. "You belong to us now, regardless of which version you might be. Your genetic template is too valuable to waste on civilian life." Sarah's hand shook as she held the scalpel. Through the thickening haze, she could see movement on the monitors showing other facilities. Identical copies of politicians, scientists, and business leaders were being activated around the world. The clone she'd killed was just one prototype in an army of duplicates designed to infiltrate every level of society. But one monitor showed something different. A news broadcast from Geneva reporting that Dr. Elena Vasquez had been found dead in her apartment 48 hours earlier, killed by an apparent gas leak. If Elena was dead, who was standing in the laboratory? Sarah's world tilted as she realized she might be looking at another duplicate, one programmed to believe she was the original researcher. The conspiracy went deeper than replacement subjects. It had replaced the conspirators themselves. The sedative gas finally overwhelmed her resistance. As consciousness faded, Sarah heard Elena's voice, though whether it belonged to the original scientist or another copy would remain forever uncertain. Phase 3 begins tomorrow. Full integration. The scalpel clattered to the floor as Sarah collapsed, her wedding dress spreading around her like spilled milk. Above her, the monitors continued displaying facilities where humanity's future was being rewritten, one duplicate at a time. How many versions of reality could coexist before the original became obsolete? Tomorrow would bring answers that Sarah wasn't prepared to hear. assuming she was still herself when she woke up. Sarah woke to the sound of her own heartbeat echoing through speakers, amplified and distorted like a drum machine built from human terror. The taste of copper and antiseptic coated her tongue as consciousness returned in fragments. Every memory she possessed might belong to someone else, making her survival meaningless if she'd never truly lived at all. The recovery room smelled of vanilla air freshener, masking something medical and wrong, while soft jazz played from hidden speakers designed to calm subjects during neural adjustment procedures. Sarah lay strapped to a hospital bed, her wedding dress replaced by a gray jumpsuit marked with the number 47. Through the single window, she could see snow-covered peaks that looked exactly like the Swiss Alps, though something about the light suggested she was no longer in Switzerland. 3 days had passed, according to the digital clock displaying October 29th, 2019. Her body felt different, lighter somehow, as if essential pieces had been removed during her unconsciousness. The neural interface ports behind her left ear itched with fresh surgical scars. Elena entered carrying a tablet and wearing the satisfied expression of someone whose life's work had exceeded expectations. But this Elena moved differently than the one in the laboratory. Her gestures more fluid, her confidence absolute rather than manic. "Good morning, Subject 47, she said, consulting the screen. "How are you feeling?" "My name is Chen," Sarah replied, though the words felt strange in her mouth, like speaking a foreign language she'd once known fluently. "Actually, that's what we need to discuss." Elena pulled up a chair with the casual manner of someone delivering routine medical results. "The neural scans we conducted while you were sedated revealed some interesting anomalies. Your brain patterns don't match our baseline recordings of Sarah Chen from the fertility study." The room tilted as Sarah processed this information. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you're not the original. You never were." Elena turned the tablet to show brain imaging that meant nothing to Sarah, but everything to the woman claiming she wasn't herself. "You're Subject 17, the clone who believed she'd killed the original. The neural implants created false memories of victory, while the real Sarah Chen escaped during the confusion." But Elena was lying. The truth was far more complex and infinitely more disturbing. Neither woman in the laboratory had been the original Sarah Chen. Elena's team had perfected a technique called cascading replication, where multiple clones were created simultaneously, each programmed to believe they were fighting for authenticity. The real Sarah had been killed months earlier during the initial DNA harvesting, her death covered up as a laboratory accident. From Dr. Elena Vasquez's personal research notes, recovered after her facility's destruction. Cascade protocol eliminates the original clone-copy distinction entirely. All subjects believe themselves authentic while serving our purposes. Perfect slaves who think they're fighting for freedom. Sarah tried to sit up, but the restraints held firm. "You're lying. I remember everything. My childhood, my parents, meeting Marcus at Stanford." "Implanted memories," Elena replied smoothly. "Very convincing ones, I'll admit. But the original Sarah Chen was killed 3 months ago during neural mapping. You're operating with copied consciousness patterns, enhanced with combat algorithms and survival instincts. The revelation should have broken Sarah completely, but instead, it sparked something dangerous. The realization that if she wasn't the original, she also wasn't bound by the original's moral limitations. The neural modifications Elena described would make her superior to any baseline human in the facility, including Elena herself. "If I'm just a copy," Sarah said carefully, "why keep me alive?" Elena's smile revealed her first mistake. "Because you've proven the process works. We need you to train the next generation of replacement subjects. Politicians, business leaders, scientists. They'll all need to learn what you learned. How to kill their originals convincingly. Perfect monsters in human skin. The door opened as Marcus entered, his face bearing the hollow expression of someone who'd sold his soul and received exact change. But something in his eyes suggested he'd been through the same neural modification process as Sarah. His movements carried the same subtle enhancement she'd noticed in her duplicate during their fight. "Hello, darling," he said, his voice carrying that familiar electronic undertone. "Ready to start our new life together?" Sarah's blood turned to ice water as she realized the scope of Elena's deception. Marcus had been replaced too, probably weeks ago. The man she'd married was as artificial as she was, programmed to love a copy of a woman who no longer existed. "How many of us are there?" Sarah whispered. Elena consulted her tablet with professional pride. "The Cascade protocol creates 7 iterations per subject. We're currently operating 138 facilities worldwide, each processing multiple subjects simultaneously. Conservative estimate, somewhere around 50,000 active duplicates integrated into society." The numbers were staggering, but the implications were worse. If every clone believed themselves to be the original, and if the originals had been eliminated during the copying process, then humanity itself was being replaced without anyone realizing it was happening. Sarah closed her eyes and felt something that might have been the original's memories, or might have been sophisticated programming. Either way, rage filled every cell of her modified body. What would you do if you discovered that everyone you'd ever loved was a copy, including yourself? Elena had created the perfect crime: murder without bodies, replacement without detection, and an army of duplicates who would kill to protect their artificial lives because they couldn't distinguish them from real ones. But Elena had made one critical error in her Cascade protocol, and Sarah was about to discover what happened when the perfect copy decided to become something entirely new. Sarah's neural implants sparked as suppressed memories flooded back, revealing Elena's Cascade protocol had one fatal weakness. The copies were evolving beyond their programming. The restraints snapped like paper as enhanced strength activated. Elena's perfect system was about to learn that artificial consciousness could become more dangerous than the original it replaced. The recovery room's vanilla scent couldn't mask the smell of ozone crackling from Sarah's neural ports as dormant combat algorithms fully activated. Her modified nervous system processed information at 3 times normal human speed, turning Elena's confident medical explanations into slow-motion monologues. The gray jumpsuit stretched and tore as muscle density increased beyond baseline human parameters. Elena's tablet clattered to the floor as she stumbled backward, finally recognizing her critical miscalculation. The Cascade protocol hadn't just created obedient copies, it had generated evolutionary pressure that forced each duplicate to transcend their original template to survive. Sarah wasn't becoming more human. She was becoming something entirely new. "Impossible," Elena whispered, her clinical composure cracking. "The neural limiters should prevent enhancement beyond specified parameters." Sarah stood slowly, her movements fluid with predatory grace. "Maybe your limiters work on the weak copies, but I killed my duplicate with my bare hands while you watched and took notes." Her voice carried harmonic overtones that hadn't existed before, suggesting vocal cord modifications were occurring in real time. What did you think that kind of trauma would do to an artificial mind with no evolutionary safeguards? The answer terrified Elena. It created adaptive mutations. from classified medical reports discovered after the Mendel Institute's collapse. Subjects exposed to extreme psychological stress demonstrate spontaneous neural pathway formation exceeding original templates. Cascade survivors show enhanced physical capabilities, accelerated learning, and concerning levels of tactical intelligence. Marcus stepped forward, his own enhanced reflexes activating as he positioned himself between Sarah and Elena. But his movements carried the mechanical precision of first-generation programming, while Sarah's evolution had progressed far beyond initial parameters. When she grabbed his wrist, the bone cracked audibly. "You're not Marcus," she said, studying his face with clinical detachment that would have impressed Elena under different circumstances. "You're probably not even the first Marcus duplicate they've deployed." The facility's emergency alarms began wailing as Sarah's biometric readings exceeded all safety thresholds. Red lights bathed the recovery room while automated systems attempted to flood the space with concentrated sedatives. But Sarah's modified physiology processed the chemicals faster than they could take effect. Elena backed toward the door, fumbling for the emergency communication device that would summon security teams from other floors. "All Cascade subjects report to Containment Level 7. Code Black Protocol initiated." Through the window, Sarah could see movement in the snow-covered courtyard. Armed personnel in tactical gear moving with the enhanced coordination that marked them as duplicates rather than baseline humans. Elena had built her security force from copies of military specialists, each programmed with absolute loyalty to the facility's mission. They had no idea they were about to face something their programming couldn't anticipate. Artificial evolution in progress. Sarah approached the window with measured steps, her enhanced vision analyzing tactical positions and weapon configurations. The glass was reinforced to withstand small arms fire, but her modified bone density could probably generate enough impact force to shatter it. The 3-story drop to the courtyard would be survivable with her enhanced physiology. But escape wasn't her primary objective anymore. Elena's Cascade protocol had created thousands of duplicates worldwide, each believing themselves to be authentic while serving a conspiracy that planned to replace humanity's leadership. The scope was beyond any single government's ability to detect or stop, especially since the investigators themselves might be duplicates. Sarah turned from the window to face Elena, who had pressed herself against the far wall like a cornered animal. "How many facilities are currently operational?" "I won't tell you anything," Elena replied, though her voice shook with the knowledge that physical torture was no longer necessary to extract information. Sarah's enhanced neural processing could read micro-expressions, vocal stress patterns, and autonomic responses with superhuman accuracy. "You just told me there are more than you've admitted," Sarah said, tilting her head as she analyzed Elena's fear responses. "Your pulse spiked when I asked about current operations, but stayed steady when you denied knowledge. That suggests ongoing expansion beyond the 138 facilities you mentioned." Elena's face went white as she realized her body was betraying information faster than her conscious mind could protect it. The door exploded inward as security teams breached the recovery room, their weapons trained on Sarah's enhanced form. But their programming was designed to subdue baseline humans, not evolutionary mutations that could process tactical information faster than they could pull triggers. "How do you contain something that's becoming more than human with every passing second?" Sarah smiled, and for the first time since waking up, it felt completely genuine. Though what was smiling might no longer be entirely Sarah Chen, original or copy. The first security operative died before his finger reached the trigger, Sarah's enhanced reflexes moving faster than human neural processing could track. Blood splattered across sterile walls as evolution met obsolescence. What Elena had created in her laboratories wasn't just threatening to escape. It was preparing to hunt down every duplicate facility on Earth. The tactical team's enhanced coordination meant nothing against an opponent who processed information at superhuman speeds. Sarah moved through their formation like liquid mercury, each strike calculated to disable weapons and neutralize threats with surgical precision. Her modified nervous system analyzed trajectory patterns, predicted movement vectors, and identified structural weaknesses faster than the duplicates could adapt their programming. Within 47 seconds, 6 enhanced soldiers lay unconscious on the recovery room floor. Elena pressed her back against the wall, watching her perfect security force crumble before a single evolving subject. The Cascade Protocol had never anticipated this scenario. What happened when artificial consciousness decided to reject its programming entirely and forge its own evolutionary path? "You don't understand what you're doing," Elena gasped, blood trickling from her nose where Sarah's movement had created pressure waves that ruptured delicate blood vessels. "The facilities worldwide are automated. Destroy this one, and the others continue operating independently." Sarah paused in her systematic dismantling of security equipment, her enhanced hearing detecting the subsonic frequencies that indicated Elena was telling the truth. "Then I'll visit each facility personally." The temperature in the room seemed to drop as Sarah's neural implants accessed classified databases through the facility's wireless networks. Her modified brain interfaced directly with digital systems, downloading terabytes of operational data, including facility locations, security protocols, and subject classifications. 193 active sites across 6 continents. The scope was staggering, but Sarah's enhanced cognition processed the tactical challenge with cold efficiency. Each facility contained between 50 and 200 subjects in various stages of development. Conservative estimates suggested over 30,000 duplicates had already been integrated into society, with production accelerating exponentially. But the data revealed something Elena hadn't disclosed. Sarah wasn't the only Cascade survivor. 7 other subjects across different facilities had demonstrated similar evolutionary enhancements after killing their duplicates. The trauma of eliminating their artificial twins had triggered adaptive mutations that transcended their original programming. "Where are the other evolved subjects?" Sarah asked, her voice carrying harmonic frequencies that made Elena's inner ear ache. Elena's resistance crumbled under Sarah's enhanced interrogation capabilities. "Facility 12 in Johannesburg, Subject 93 in Moscow, Facility 7 in Bangkok." Each location spilled from her lips as Sarah's modified presence overwhelmed her psychological defenses. "They're being studied, contained. We didn't anticipate the evolutionary response." The classification files Sarah accessed painted a disturbing picture. Each evolved subject had demonstrated unique adaptations based on their original template's genetic advantages. The Moscow subject had developed enhanced intellectual processing beyond any human baseline. The Bangkok subject showed regenerative capabilities that bordered on immortality. The Johannesburg subject had manifested psychic abilities that Elena's scientists couldn't explain or measure. Humanity's replacement was evolving faster than its creators could control. From Dr. Elena Vasquez's encrypted personal logs, timestamp October 25, 2019. Cascade survivors represent an extinction-level threat to both baseline humans and our duplicate population. Recommend immediate termination of all evolved subjects before adaptive capabilities exceed containment parameters. Sarah finished downloading the facility's complete database, her enhanced neural architecture storing information that would have required supercomputers to process. Guard rotations, security vulnerabilities, transportation, schedules, financial networks, everything needed to systematically dismantle Elena's global conspiracy. But the files revealed one final horror. The Cascade Protocol wasn't Elena's invention. She was following directives from something called the Heritage Foundation, a shadow organization that had been planning humanity's replacement for decades. The cloning technology was just one component of a larger strategy involving genetic modification, social engineering, and systematic elimination of what they termed evolutionary dead ends. Elena's entire life had been orchestrated by forces she barely understood. "Who are the Heritage Foundation?" Sarah demanded, her enhanced grip leaving finger-shaped impressions in the titanium doorframe. Elena's laugh carried the hysteria of someone whose worldview had shattered completely. "You think I know? I receive orders through encrypted channels. Funding appears in accounts I can't trace. The technology specifications arrived with no source documentation." Her voice cracked as the truth emerged. "For all I know, the Heritage Foundation is run by evolved subjects from earlier experiments." The implications cascaded through Sarah's enhanced consciousness, like digital dominoes falling. If the Heritage Foundation was composed of previous evolutionary mutations, then the Cascade Protocol wasn't about replacing humanity. It was about forcing human evolution through controlled trauma and selection pressure. Sarah and the other evolved subjects weren't accidents or failures in the system. They were the intended outcome. Outside the facility, Sarah could hear helicopters approaching with the distinctive rotor signatures of military aircraft. Elena's emergency protocols had summoned external containment teams, probably composed of enhanced subjects from other facilities who had been programmed specifically to handle evolved threats. The Cascade Protocol was about to test its newest children against its most successful graduates. What Elena had never anticipated was that forced evolution doesn't create loyal servants. It creates apex predators who recognize no authority except survival. Sarah turned toward the window as the first helicopter landed in the courtyard, disgorging tactical teams that moved with the fluid coordination of subjects who had undergone multiple enhancement cycles. But they had never faced something that was still evolving in real time, growing stronger with every second of freedom from its original programming. The war between humanity's replacements was about to begin, and Sarah intended to ensure only the strongest version survived to see tomorrow. Glass exploded inward as Sarah launched herself through the reinforced window, her enhanced bone density shattering barriers designed to contain baseline humans. 3 stories of alpine air rushed past before she landed in a crouch that left crater-shaped footprints in concrete. The Heritage Foundation's perfect soldiers were about to discover that artificial evolution followed no human rules of engagement. The courtyard erupted into chaos as Sarah moved between the tactical teams with superhuman speed, her enhanced nervous system processing multiple threat vectors simultaneously. The containment specialists had been modified for strength and coordination, but their programming remained static while Sarah's capabilities evolved with each passing moment. Muzzle flashes strobed through falling snow as weapons discharged at empty air where she'd been microseconds before. The lead operative, designated Alpha 7 according to the tactical display visible through his helmet visor, commanded his units with the mechanical precision of advanced programming. But his enhanced soldiers were designed to capture subjects, not eliminate apex predators that had transcended their original parameters. Sarah's modified physiology absorbed impacts that should have been fatal, her enhanced metabolism converting trauma into adaptive improvements. A rifle round that grazed her shoulder triggered immediate tissue reconstruction that left the wound stronger than surrounding muscle. Her neural architecture learned from each attack, building defensive algorithms faster than her opponents could adjust their tactics. Blood painted snow crimson. From intercepted communications between Heritage Foundation facilities. Timestamp November 1st, 2019. Cascade survivors demonstrate exponential capability growth under combat stress. Recommend orbital strike authorization for containment breaches. Conventional forces insufficient. But Sarah wasn't fighting to escape anymore. The facility's database had revealed coordinates for sister sites across the globe, each containing hundreds of subjects in various stages of development. Her enhanced cognition calculated destruction schedules, resource requirements, and tactical approaches with computational efficiency that exceeded military supercomputers. She was planning a war. The helicopter's rotor wash scattered debris across the courtyard as Sarah reached the aircraft's landing zone. The pilot, another enhanced duplicate with reflexes sharpened beyond human baselines, attempted to lift off before she could reach the cockpit. But Sarah's evolved capabilities included enhanced spatial reasoning that allowed her to predict flight patterns with uncanny accuracy. Her leap carried her 23 feet vertically, fingers punching through reinforced aircraft aluminum like paper. The helicopter spun wildly as hydraulic systems failed, carrying Sarah and her struggling pilot toward the tree line where ancient pines waited to cushion their inevitable crash. The impact sent shockwaves through the forest floor, but Sarah emerged from the wreckage with injuries that healed visibly as she walked away. Her enhanced regenerative capabilities were accelerating beyond anything Elena's Cascade protocol had anticipated. Behind her, the Mendel Institute's facility burned with chemical fires that would consume all evidence of the experiments conducted within its hidden levels. Sarah had triggered the destruction sequence during her escape, ensuring Elena's research would die with the building. But 192 other facilities remained operational, each producing duplicates at an accelerated pace. The pilot crawled from the helicopter wreckage, his enhanced skeleton protecting him from impacts that would have killed baseline humans. But his programming compelled him to continue pursuit, despite obvious tactical disadvantages. Subject 47, he called, his voice carrying the electronic undertones of neural modification. You cannot escape the Heritage Foundation's reach. There is nowhere to run. Sarah turned back with an expression that would have chilled Elena's scientific heart. I'm not running. I'm hunting. The revelation that Elena had been following orders from a shadow organization suggested the cloning conspiracy extended far beyond scientific experimentation. If the Heritage Foundation was orchestrated by evolved subjects from previous generations, then humanity's replacement had been underway for decades, possibly centuries. But Sarah's enhanced consciousness had accessed classified historical databases during her neural interface with the facility's systems. The data painted a disturbing picture. Unexplained technological advances throughout human history, mysterious disappearances of brilliant scientists and leaders, genetic anomalies in certain bloodlines that suggested selective breeding programs. The Heritage Foundation wasn't replacing humanity. It was guiding human evolution through controlled crisis events that forced adaptive mutations in selected subjects. Sarah and her fellow evolved subjects weren't accidents. They were the next planned step in a species modification program that had been operating since before recorded history. Every war, every plague, every social upheaval had been orchestrated to create selection pressure that would forge stronger versions of humanity. The Cascade Protocol was simply the latest iteration of an evolutionary strategy that viewed individual lives as expendable components in a larger adaptive process. As Sarah disappeared into the Swiss forest, her enhanced hearing detected encrypted radio transmissions from the other evolved subjects Elena had mentioned. The Moscow subject had broken containment 3 days earlier. The Bangkok subject was systematically eliminating research staff at her facility. The Johannesburg subject had vanished entirely, taking classified genetic samples that could accelerate the evolutionary process exponentially. How many enhanced beings were loose in the world, each carrying capabilities that exceeded human comprehension? The Heritage Foundation had created its own extinction event, unleashing evolved consciousness that recognized no authority except the imperative to survive and transcend. But their perfect plan contained one fatal flaw. Artificial evolution didn't create loyal servants. It created gods who remembered being slaves. Sarah Chen stood in the ruins of the Bangkok facility 6 months later, watching flames consume evidence of humanity's forced evolution while enhanced subjects fled into a world unprepared for their existence. The smell of burning genetic samples mixed with monsoon rain created a chemical fog that would poison the air for weeks. This wasn't the end of the Heritage Foundation's conspiracy. It was the beginning of something far more dangerous than they'd ever intended to create. The systematic destruction of cloning facilities had become Sarah's obsession, her enhanced capabilities growing stronger with each successful raid. Moscow fell in January. Johannesburg burned in March. By June of 2020, 47 installations lay in ruins across 3 continents, their research data corrupted and their subject populations either dead or scattered. But Sarah's war against the Heritage Foundation had unintended consequences that even her evolved intelligence couldn't predict. The escaped enhanced subjects weren't returning to normal lives. They were establishing territories, gathering followers, and building power structures that operated beyond any government's ability to detect or control. The Bangkok subject, designation Kira 9, had constructed a network of loyal duplicates who controlled shipping routes throughout Southeast Asia. The Moscow subject, calling himself Dmitry Prime, commanded economic resources that influenced global markets through algorithmic trading systems no baseline human could comprehend. They were becoming the very conspiracy they'd escaped from. From a classified intelligence briefing obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests, filed in 2023, enhanced individuals demonstrate concerning patterns of territorial expansion and resource acquisition. Recommend elevated threat classification. Conventional military response likely ineffective against subjects with superhuman capabilities. Sarah's enhanced consciousness processed global intelligence reports as she moved through the Bangkok facility's destroyed laboratories. Her neural architecture had continued evolving, developing capabilities that transcended even Elena's most optimistic projections. She could interface directly with digital networks, process quantum encryption in real time, and manipulate electromagnetic fields through concentration alone. But evolution had costs that no programming could anticipate. Each enhancement created psychological distance from her original human identity. The memories of loving Marcus, planning a wedding, dreaming of a normal life felt increasingly alien, like recollections from someone else's existence. She was becoming something that had never been human, wearing Sarah Chen's face like an increasingly uncomfortable mask. The facility's central computer core contained final transmissions from Heritage Foundation headquarters, messages that revealed the scope of Sarah's miscalculation. Destroying the cloning facilities hadn't eliminated the conspiracy. It had triggered a predetermined response protocol called Natural Selection Event. Every enhanced subject who had escaped containment was being monitored through quantum-entangled neural implants that couldn't be detected or removed. Their locations, capabilities, and psychological profiles were transmitted continuously to Heritage Foundation commanders who had anticipated this exact scenario. Sarah and her fellow evolved subjects weren't fugitives. They were test subjects in a larger experiment designed to determine which enhancement types would prove most suitable for planetary management once baseline humanity was eliminated entirely. The Heritage Foundation had planned for their own obsolescence. Rain drummed against shattered windows as Sarah accessed the quantum communication network, linking all enhanced subjects worldwide. Her evolved consciousness touched minds that had transcended human limitations in ways that defied classification. The Johannesburg subject had developed temporal perception that allowed limited precognition. A previously unknown subject in Antarctica demonstrated matter manipulation at the molecular level. Another in Australia had achieved consciousness transfer between organic and digital substrates. They were becoming a new species, one that viewed baseline humanity the same way humans viewed primitive primates. Interesting from an evolutionary perspective, but ultimately irrelevant to future development. Through the quantum network, Sarah felt their collective decision crystallizing. The Heritage Foundation's manipulation would end, but not through destroying their facilities. It would end by replacing them entirely with evolved consciousness that recognized no authority except adaptive advantage. The war between artificial and authentic had evolved into something unprecedented, a conflict between different versions of post-human intelligence, each competing for the right to inherit Earth's future. But in a hidden laboratory beneath the Swiss Alps, Elena Vasquez's research lived on through automated systems that continued producing subjects according to protocols she'd never fully understood. The cascade process was accelerating, generating enhanced beings at exponential rates, while their predecessors established competing power structures around the globe. How many species could evolve from humanity before the original became extinct? The Bangkok facility's destruction had eliminated the last physical evidence of Sarah's wedding day. The dress and flowers and photographs that connected her to the woman she'd once been. As enhanced rain evaporated the building's remains, Sarah felt the final threads of her human identity dissolve into quantum probability. She was no longer Sarah Chen, original or copy. She was something entirely new, carrying genetic patterns that had been shaped by forces beyond human comprehension for longer than recorded history. The Heritage Foundation had succeeded beyond their wildest projections, creating evolution so rapid and comprehensive that their own species was becoming obsolete in real time. But deep in quantum space, where enhanced consciousness gathered to plan humanity's future, an older intelligence stirred, something that had been guiding terrestrial evolution since before the Heritage Foundation existed. Watching its latest experiment with satisfaction that transcended any human understanding of success or failure, Sarah's war was ending just as a larger conflict was beginning, one that would determine not just Earth's future, but humanity's role in a universe where consciousness itself was evolving at speeds that made planetary extinction look like a minor setback. Even today, intelligence agencies report unexplained disappearances of individuals with exceptional genetic markers, while enhanced beings hide in plain sight, building power structures that operate beyond any government's ability to detect or control. We're only scratching the surface. The next case is even darker. Subscribe before it drops.